Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 755. I'm Tom Quigley, your host. Today, we feature an essay on the relationship between engagement, hierarchy, and fatalism, based on a discussion of the topic between the SPaMCAST columnists. The idea of hierarchy, engagement, and fatalism struck a nerve with the family. To a person, the prevailing attitude is that hierarchy is good to a point. Jon M Quigley also joins the cast in the second slot this week with a discussion of making mistakes. Learning from mistakes is important, but making the same mistake over and over is not a sign that you're learning. The Ideas of Hierarchy, Engagement, and Fatalism by Thomas M. Quigley, Jr., Megan E. Quigley. The ideas of hierarchy, engagement, and fatalism struck a nerve with the SPaMCAST family. To a person, the prevailing attitude is that hierarchy has value, but only to a point. Susan Parente identified that hierarchies are valuable for quick decision-making and action. A well-understood and compact chain of control that does not need a Google search to determine who can make a decision is useful. The caveats to the term useful include understood and compact. In the same breath, to a person, they all agreed that while some hierarchy is good, too much is not. Hierarchies grow until they find a tipping point where they become too heavy or too stolid and protective. Past a certain point, they dampen engagement and yield mediocrity without intervention. There are all sorts of good reasons for organizations to react in this fashion, but mediocrity in a competitive environment is the harbinger of a death spiral. As Case Kostecki, SPaMCAST's newest columnist, stated, hierarchy can hinder engagement, and especially when those individuals that need to speak out get shut down. One of the troubling aspects of hierarchy as it spoils is the appearance of denied responsibility. One aspect of this behavior occurs when individuals feel that they are not personally responsible for certain actions or decisions because they're following orders or instructions. You won't have to tax your memory to dredge up incidents where you've heard someone say, "I was just doing what I was told." The My Lai massacre is an example of this phenomenon at its worst. Look it up. While this is less an issue of hierarchy than it is a people issue, the culture of hierarchy is a contributor. As we have noted in earlier installments, rigid command and control hierarchies provide space for fatalism to emerge. Combine fatalism and layers of hierarchy that feel they are cut off from participating in decision processes, there is little reason for them to feel any responsibility for their actions. The relationship between hierarchy, engagement, and fatalism represent a balancing act. The SPaMCAST columnists identified two concepts that affect the balance between these three areas. The problem often boils down to empowerment and aligning with a common goal. Jon M Quigley introduced the concept of resilience into the discussion, which highlighted the need for alignment to a strong goal. Tony Timble stated engagement will be higher if the hierarchy delegates and empowers people to act on that delegation. The combination of delegation and empowerment reduces the potential for blame shifting and hierarchy-driven fatalism. Aligning to a common goal provides a purpose for people to rally around. Note, aligning is not the same thing as being told what your goal is. Aligning to a common goal is powerful. A strong goal provides fertile ground for the sense of belonging to grow, leading to resilience and engagement. Combining empowerment and goal alignment helps to push back the forces of fatalism. Knowing the solution and acting on those solutions are two very different things. It's easy to accept that how we lead and how we work with others is just how it's done. Fatalism can exist everywhere. Jeremy Berrio pointed out a role change agents must play. When functional experts are promoted without a good mentor to show what leadership means, they will rule more than lead. As people interested in change, we need to reach out to mentor fellow leaders, lead by example, or accept your lot. These ideas sure seem to stir up a lot of passion. Feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. We look forward to the conversation. Jon M Quigley, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, brother.
Thank you. Your alpha and omega of product development is a favorite. Jon, today, succession planning. I think everybody ought to be doing succession planning, and they ought to make sure that they keep that really tight in terms of only working on succession planning with the people that are the closest to I'm kidding. Jon.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know why you're saying that. It is possible to get me to rise and take the bait.
I knew I was winding you up.
Yep, I'm going to look up at that and go, I know there's a hook in that. I'm not going to just take that like that.
All right. So in terms of running an organization, any organization, what is succession planning and why do we care?
Well, succession planning, in my experience, is you have key people in your organization that do things at a certain level. It doesn't matter the level. Eventually, those people are going to retire, move on, maybe leave, maybe, God forbid, some bad things happen to them and they're unable to do their job anymore. Host of factors, right? They won't be there at some point. We all have this limited life cycle, so it's going to happen, period. So succession planning is figuring out how to get the knowledge, the tribal knowledge, and all those other things of the organization's future into those people in a pipeline so that when one falls, we have n number of people that could replace that person. And we essentially can keep going as best we can given what we've been dealt, the hand we've been dealt.
So why don't we just assume that we'll be able to live with sort of transactional knowledge? I'll have a little bit of it and everybody knows that I have it, and that's how we'll work. We'll just have a network of transactional knowledge, and when somebody plugs out, we'll be able to, I guess, through that succession planning, just plug somebody else in.
Yeah, that's part of the issue right there. The thing is, people encounter different circumstances, right? And even worse, their interpretation or the lessons that are learned of this encountering of this circumstance may vary. So even if you experience the same thing I experienced, you may come away with a whole different set of causes, reasons, or take away lessons and things like that. This is the reason why you really need to spread your learning around anyway, because you could be wrong, I could be wrong. If I look at it from my perspective, I'm probably going to be entrenched in that because I see it the way I see it. If I never hear about yours, I never am available to a counterpoint to how this thing turned out the way it did. I worked at a company where I heard a manager say, it's okay to make mistakes, but can't we make a different one? Can't we make different ones? And the reason he said that was because some pockets of the company learned something while others did not. So this is the reason why you kind of want to distribute the knowledge anyway, right? Now, how this is connected to succession planning is instead of having that single transactional source with interface one-to-one kind of thing, you have many-to-one opportunities for that, right? So instead of, I know this person is competent because I've been dealing only with this one person and they share, I've seen some elements of competency, they can maybe take my place. You have a bunch of people, and you likely already do have a bunch of people that could take that spot.
Well, how would you know that?
That's right.
I think there's a whole lot of psychology that says people tend to, if left to their own devices, tend to group together and, like people that they like and not like people they don't like. And
yep.
So there's generally left to their own devices, diversity tends to go down for diversity of intellect and thought and things like that.
That's a fact, for sure. Or even things like the halo and horns effect. If I like you because you've done one thing good, now all of a sudden you've done one thing I value. You're obviously a good person, and I will consider you for a whole bunch of other things. Versus, for example, I'm not late. I will not be late. If I'm late, something bad's going to happen. It's because something bad has happened. So when I see somebody else show up late, I attribute bad things to them being late because I value being on time. They don't value that. So I look at them with some suspicion, and I'm going to attach, they're just not as motivated or in the game as I think they should be. That can't be true at all. Probably isn't true at all.
Probably. Well, who knows, right? Who knows? That's the problem with those cognitive biases. They are very difficult to see through. In terms of product development, software development, how can an organization do a better job at succession planning?
I think that one thing we need to get away from is the thinking of the one-to-one kind of succession planning method. I've worked at big companies, and I've seen people who are interested in making
one-to-one.
Okay, like I'm a VP of something or a manager in a department, and I see only one person that can be doing that succession. I spend my time on this one person, or maybe not all of it, but the most of it, grooming this one person to take my spot. That's sort of what I'm considering here.
Well, isn't that like what we see at football teams in the U.S. here? The whoever is the first string quarterback gets all the practice snaps. Then the second string might get a few of the practice snaps, and the poor third string person who was probably never going to play doesn't get any of the snaps. And I don't know what they really do, except in San Francisco, which happened this year, right? Yeah, they ended up going through 4 quarterbacks. Yeah. And those third string quarterbacks who never got any of, in terms of the snaps in the succession planning, one of them actually did very well. But when they got to the number 4 guy, it didn't work out well for them.
Yeah, and we're surprised. And we act like they probably felt like they had a surprise when the guy has not been working with the team and has spent as many hours as he could probably studying the manuals and stuff, because essentially that's what he has he's relegated to, because he's not getting any physical time. Exactly. And, textbooks only carry us so far, for sure.
Absolutely. Real life experience and context is highly important. So people shouldn't go 1-for-1. Should they go 100-to-1? What's sort of is there an equation, or is there some sort of approach that one would think about?
I can't think of an equation for this, but many things don't really distill down to engineer at heart that I am. I like it when things distill down to equations, but the reality is, people, that's not going to work. It's not how it works. But I think there are some things we can do. The thinking that one person on our team or one group, one person, we should have one person in mind for our succession plan. I don't think that's valid. I don't think that's helpful. It's probably, a small percentage of the time that will work. But you got to know you're probably demoralizing some of your team when they realize there's no sense in applying for that next job, because you already know who you want to have, that job. And so your team gets the perspective that you have to be from this over here to get a position like this in the company. That means they either have to treat this thing, instead of like a career, it becomes more like a job, or they have to leave your company where somebody would treat them more like they have a career. That's sort of the position you're putting them in. And if you demoralize them to the point where they think they have a job, then you're probably not getting every bit of engagement out of them.
We're back to that word engagement. We've been there a few times, haven't we?
Yeah, without it, you got nothing. So there is that. So I think what you need to do is contrive instances in your work where, as anybody you think could be a candidate is learning new things that would help you to understand their capability and their motivation in this context. And then it becomes kind of an experience path, right? You set them up in these situations and see how they do, and learn from that, and they learn from that, and you coach them through it if they don't do well. And you'll probably see some fall out that are not interested in this being part of a succession plan. There's plenty of people who get a job and they're like, this is good for me. It pays my bills and I'm more focused on these other things anyway.
Yeah, I don't meet very many of those these days. At least
I don't either, but
they must exist. Jon, succession planning, a good thing if it's done correctly, correct?
Correct, yes.
If people wanted to continue the conversation with you on succession planning, how it fits into the product development world, how would they go about doing that?
Connect with me on LinkedIn, Jon M Quigley, or send me an email on jon.quigley@valuetransform.com.
Jon, always a pleasure, sir. Looking forward to next month.
Same here, Tom. Me too. I'm always looking forward to having these chats with you.
In Reread Saturday News, this week we finished the reread of Chapter 5 of Team Topologies. As noted last week, Chapter 5 is a powerhouse. This week, let's examine some of the behaviors that the 4 fundamental topologies exhibit. Understanding how teams structured in this manner should behave will also be useful for understanding which type of team delivers the most value to an organization for a specific context. Remember, buy a copy, read along. Link in the show notes to buy a copy, or just go to Amazon or your local bookstore. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 756, we welcome back Paul Gibbons. In this visit, we discuss his new book, Change Myths, The Professional's Guide to Separating Sense from Nonsense, which he co-authored with Tricia Kennedy. The book gives you the tools to sort the sense from the nonsense. And there is a lot of nonsense in the change management field. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?